接那个接，那女的要过去，那男的嘞，男的不辛苦的吗？你得怎么感受别人，准备跟老婆复合，这辈子找死和拼，笑什么？
看到你这种男人，我觉得好可笑。
我看你才好可笑的，这种东西还敢去威胁别人，你那不能给我皮的吗？520，我爱你，爱个鸟啊，爱。
520, I love you. Love what? Just loneliness. Every year on this so-called 520 Valentine's Day, there's always a whole wave of gold diggers becoming super active, just like octopuses, one hand reaching out to this man for 520 yuan, the other hand going to that man to scam 1,314 yuan. They say things like, I don't want the money. I want to see your attitude about love. But when you really think about it, isn't it just another way of getting men to cough up the cash? If you want money from men, just say it directly. Don't use that so-called attitude as a fig leaf. So I think on this 520 day, all of us men should stop simping for these women. Let's all stop. If you don't simp, I don't simp, he doesn't simp, then naturally, those women will start simping for us, right? But the problem is, there's always that one pathetic guy who goes behind everyone's back and simps anyway, making all our restraint completely pointless. You want to simp? Fine. But don't go thinking that if other men hold back and you're the only one simping, your chances of success will be higher. I think the chance of your brain being waterlogged is much higher. Honestly, some men are just hopeless. It's both ridiculous and sad.
520本来就不是什么节日，但是250多了才有了520。
520 was never a real holiday to begin with. The only reason it got hyped up is because there are too many simps, which gave birth to the ridiculous symbol of 520. An ordinary day was forcefully assigned a meaning, labeled as some I love you day, and in the end became a carnival for merchants and a harvesting ground for consumers. Just look at it now, not only is there 520, but there's also Black Valentine's Day, White Valentine's Day, and a whole bunch of other nonsense. It's all about boosting consumption and heating up the hype. The craziest part is people are actually enjoying it, willingly brainwashed. A lot of women, if they don't get a gift or a money transfer on 520, go home and start fighting with their husbands. This is a textbook case of killing with kindness. See, living a simple, steady life as a couple should be perfectly fine, but people just have to invent a holiday to test the strength of a relationship. If your husband or boyfriend sends a smaller red envelope, you feel like he doesn't value you, and you start a huge argument. But at the end of the day, you've just fallen into a marketing trap. Honestly, if there weren't so many simps, would 520 even exist? It's a perfectly normal day, yet instead of living it sincerely and peacefully, people are scrambling to buy roses and snatch up chocolates. Wouldn't it be better to pick up some greens and a bit of pork, go home and cook a nice dish, sip a little wine, and have a chat with the family? Talk about what happened during the day? That kind of ordinary, genuine life, isn't that the most meaningful 520? But in reality, the ones actually celebrating this so-called 520 holiday often aren't the original couples, but rather the mistresses and the so-called gold diggers. Ladies, don't let yourselves get trapped by this capitalist scheme. On 520, you naively remind your husband, "Hey, it's 520 today, don't forget my gift." What you don't realize is, once he gets nervous and thinks about getting you something, he might as well get her something too. Aren't you just reminding him to spend twice as much? In the end, no one wins. So be smart, stop being manipulated by these trends. These holidays don't harvest happiness. What they harvest is your husband's wallet, and even the stability of your marriage. Skipping 520 is no big deal. True happiness never came from flowers or chocolates. It lives in a warm bowl of soup, a caring word, and someone who truly understands you in everyday life. One last thing, guys, stop being simps. It's completely pointless.
大家有没有发现啊，今年的情人节特别冷清。
Has anyone noticed that this year's 520 Valentine's Day feels unusually quiet? The most obvious change is this: you can hardly see anyone posting about receiving red envelopes or money transfers on their social media. In fact, this trend already started becoming apparent during last year's Qixi festival. In previous years, every time Valentine's Day came around, posts flaunting love and money would flood our feeds for several days. But now, you don't even see trending topics like how ugly the bouquet my boyfriend gave me is. This morning, As I was scrolling through my feed, I happened to see a girl discussing this topic. I've already gotten her permission, so I'm going to read out what she posted. It's quite interesting. She said, "The winds have definitely shifted. I checked my feed this morning and couldn't find a single post showing off red envelopes or transfers. What's going on? Just a few years ago, everyone was sharing like crazy, but this year, there's not a single one." She added, "Every phenomenon must have its own underlying logic." Someone commented below saying that she did receive a red envelope, but since no one else was posting, she didn't feel comfortable posting hers either. The original author replied, saying, "It's not just your feed that's quiet, mine too. Feeds everywhere are probably the same. There really are fewer men sending money." This precisely shows a trend. Although a few women are still receiving red envelopes or transfers, the overall number has clearly decreased. Why is that? One girl followed up and asked, "What's the real reason behind this?" The original poster replied, "The reason is simple, the economy is declining, and men have become more clear-headed. There are fewer simps, which means fewer men are sending money to women. In other words, the simp economy is collapsing across the board." This concept of the simp economy collapsing was actually proposed as early as last year. The logic behind it is very straightforward. First, the overall economic climate is bad, and men simply don't have much money in their hands. Second, they no longer want to use money to please women. Today's men are increasingly focused on their own value and prefer to spend their money on themselves, like buying electronics, sneakers, or clothes. They believe this kind of spending is more worthwhile than the so-called equivalent exchange in romantic relationships. Their mindset has become, "If you treat me well, then I'll treat you well." And it's not just men, many women have changed too. In the past, asking a man to transfer money was a way to test whether he was sincere. But now, people are becoming more realistic. Making your own money is essential. People no longer make pleasing others their core goal, but instead are learning to please themselves first. I think this change might not be a bad thing. When a person learns to love themselves and has a strong inner energy, they're actually more likely to attract healthy, equal relationships. Of course, let's think even deeper. Why has the simp economy completely collapsed? The first reason is the data released by the National Civil Affairs Bureau. The number of marriage registrations dropped by 20% last year. Young people don't even want to get married anymore. Do you still expect them to celebrate made-up holidays, buy flowers, or send red envelopes? The second reason is also crucial. Men's willingness to marry has now clearly fallen below that of women. Looking back since the 1980s, China has long had a male-dominated gender ratio. In the past, many women were used to judging a man's sincerity by asking, "Is he willing to spend money on me?" But now, this standard is gradually becoming invalid, because men's enthusiasm for marriage keeps declining. One set of data shows that the unmarried rate among 30-year-old men has risen by nearly 20 percentage points, while the rate for 30-year-old women has also increased by about 10 points. This indicates that the current matchmaking market is shifting toward a more women, fewer men dynamic. Truly high-quality male candidates have become scarce. You could even say they're in high demand. So those girls who are overly delicate, spoiled, or have princess syndrome are increasingly out of favor, just like how the stereotype of the iron-fisted straight man is also losing popularity. No one wants to keep giving endlessly, and no one wants to keep bending over backwards for someone, because no matter how hard you try, there's no guarantee you'll get anything in return. Just like that brutally honest saying goes, a simp always ends up with nothing. If you want a relationship to last, it will always depend on genuine love for genuine love.
今天情人节有没有什么都没有收到的？
Ladies, today is 520 Valentine's Day. Has anyone else, like me, not received anything all day? I'm not exaggerating if on this very holiday he hasn't sent you any sign of care, be it a discount coupon, dinner invitation, WeChat transfer, red envelope, or even a single flower, a small gift. Then we can really consider breaking up. Because if a man cares about you, he will surely make every effort on a holiday to let you feel valued. Even if he's short on cash, he will still show his intentions. But if today he remains completely indifferent, you can pretty much conclude that he no longer wants to invest in this relationship. In his eyes, whether you exist or not makes no difference. Ladies, stop deceiving yourselves and stop wasting precious time. Wake up early, cut your losses promptly. Let's bravely move forward. The next man will truly be better.
我觉得今年520咱就别过了。 I think we really don't need to go along with the crowd and celebrate this year's 520 Valentine's Day. 'Cause this day, which was originally meant to symbolize love, has already lost its true meaning. You'll notice more and more couples are actually fighting over things like red envelopes and gifts on this very day, sometimes even ending up in big arguments or breaking up. And behind this atmosphere, in fact, are countless businesses fanning the flames. They keep creating anxiety, saying things like, if a man doesn't send flowers or gifts, he doesn't love you, using a whole set of seemingly romantic but actually distorted values to influence the public. But to be honest, behind all of this, aren't they just trying to sell their products? The most ironic thing is, even though we're treating Valentine's Day more and more seriously every year, and gifts are being exchanged more and more frequently, national statistics show that the actual marriage rate is still steadily declining. This really makes one wonder, who is it that's truly tarnishing the essence of love? I'm saying all of this not to attack anyone, I just want to remind everyone, stop using red envelope transfers and gifts as a measure of love. Let 520 strip away its commercial packaging and stench of money, and return to the pure form of love it was originally meant to be.
Chinese men are indeed becoming more and more clear-headed. The old simp economy is probably about to come to a complete end. You see, in the past, on 520 Valentine's Day, hotels in the cities were basically fully booked, and you couldn't find a single vacant room near any motel. But this year, it's so quiet it feels like everything is shut down. Forget crowds. It's like Mount Tai at midnight, dead silent. In the past, on 520 Valentine's Day, if your girlfriend gave you a pack of cigarettes worth 100 yuan, you would feel incredibly proud and even post about it on your social media. But if you gave her a 100 yuan gift, she could flip out on the spot, calling you stingy and cheap. You could use 100 yuan to please yourself, but trying to make your girlfriend happy with that amount, you'd only get one sentence in return. This is way too cheap. Now, many men simply choose not to date at all. After all, without having to support a girlfriend, they can't even finish spending their money. The car they wanted? They already got it early. If you send a girl a 5,200 yuan red envelope on 520 and she posts about it on her social media, she'll actually blur out your profile picture. You spend 2,300 yuan to treat her to a nice meal, and she posts about it too. Except it's just stage photos and the food. The boyfriend, you, won't appear anywhere in her post. Everything you did for her is completely useless. Nowadays on 520, a lot of men are even afraid to chat with girls. Once the chat starts, the girl says she's hungry. Once the chat starts, she says she's out of perfume. Once the chat starts, she says her phone is broken. Once the chat starts, she says she's out of makeup. Once the chat starts, she says today just so happens to be her birthday. Once the chat starts, she says her credit card is about to go overdue. Every single conversation with her feels like you're opening a donation hotline. It's like she's not dating you. She's seeking sponsorship. So, more and more men are finally realizing one truth. Love and relationships are not something everyone deserves your effort in. Smart people stay out of emotional entanglements. Only fools dive headfirst into the web of romance. So what do you think? Is 520 really about expressing love? Or is it just a consumer trap dressed up in pretty packaging? Are you willing to pay the price for 520 Valentine's Day? Feel free to leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video.